the State Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel on Monday, September 27th, 2021, from Plymouth Town Hall, the room called the Great Hall at 6:30 p.m. My name is John Mahoney, Town of Plymouth delegate or representative appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Forgive me, the Select Board. Ms. Dubois?
Pine Dubois, appointed by the Speaker of the House. David.
Dave Nichols, appointed by Governor Baker.
Pat O'Brien, Holtec representative.
Seth
John
Bickering,
Flores,
representing
Governor Baker's
DEA.
appointee.
Say that again?
Was that me?
Say that again. Who is that? Who
John
spoke what?
Flores, Governor Baker's appointee. John Flores, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
John Moylan?
Hi, I'm John Moylan, the Site Vice President, Pilgrim.
Yep. Susan Whitaker?
Hi, this is Susan Whitaker, representing Secretary Mike Keneally, Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development.
Didn't John already checked in, correct? Bob Hayden?
Good afternoon, Bob Hayden, Department of Public Utilities.
Mr. Priest?
Good evening, Jack Priest, Department of Public Health.
Ms. Waldron?
Good evening, everyone. Mary Waldron, Executive Director, Old Colony Planning Council.
John Viveros?
John Viveros, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency.
Is there any?
No more panel.
John
Okay, so-
Viveros, Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. Can I be heard?
I couldn't make that out. Oh, okay. Thank you, John.
I don't know how many people that is. I didn't get everybody out.
Are you ready to go to the minutes?
Yeah. I would announce that that's a quorum. Do you have a count?
What's the count? We got 11.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
All right, this state committee is comprised of, when fully staffed, if you will, 21 members, and we need 11 to have a quorum and to hold a meeting, and we have accomplished that tonight, so we can move forward with the agenda. The next thing on the agenda is the approval of the previous meeting's minutes. Anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to the minutes?
Yes, I do. Mary Lampert. Page 6, line 11. Mr. Mullen announced his resignation. Rothstein announced his resignation. My question is the panel down 2 or 3? Plymouth gets 2 Plymouth appointments.
Just the minutes. We're just reviewing the minutes, Mary.
Okay, I'll move down to page 6, line 17. Review template for minutes. Mr. Priest stated he would work with Mr. Lampert to come up with a document to send to NDCAP co-chairs. And to the best of my knowledge, has he done that? And he didn't work with Mr. Lampert.
Mary, we're just seeing if the minutes are accurate. That's all we have to do right now. We're not going to determine
discuss them?
the discussion of the minutes or tasks and stuff. So it's
Okay,
just
then-
about, are they accurate?
We can come back at the end
We
of the
can
meeting
come
and
back,
address a couple
yeah.
of those points.
Yeah.
under
Well,
old
right now,
business
we
if you
have to
want.
Good.
just get through them, and I do have a couple of other issues for when they arise. Anybody else? I want to correct on page 6, line 34, that it's Council of State Governments CSG-East, not Northeast. I want to note that on page 5, line 17, immediately following the meeting, I got a correction from Mr. Noyes that it wasn't the third week of May, it was the 6th of June, the 11th of June. And that's it. And I have a question like Mary does on follow-up.
Which you'll bring up later in the meeting?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
As amended.
We have a
Yes,
motion.
as amended.
We have a motion as amended. We have a second. Any discussion?
My only question is, Pine, is that correction part of the minutes or an addition for this?
It's for this minutes, yeah. It's
Oh,
for this
okay.
minutes, yeah.
All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
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 All those against? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, moving on to the next part of the agenda, we welcome State Senators Susan Moran and Senator Mark Pacheco, and I'll turn it over to the Vice Chair Dubois for an introduction.
I want to express my deepest gratitude to the senators for showing up tonight. It's been a kind of a tortured journey for me, and I really appreciate their engagement and willingness to come forward. I know I have a little bit more to say, but I'm going to flip it right away without further delay to our dear Senator Sue Moran, who, is fairly newly elected and is acting like she's been there for a long, long time. So I really appreciate you being here tonight, Senator, and if you would take the floor for a little bit.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to see all the members, and I appreciate this opportunity to address you. And just remembering back with Pine's comments, one of my very first appearances in the hearing had to do with the nuclear power plant in Plymouth, and so I'm very happy to continue to follow the situation very closely, to continue to file legislation and to work with all of you. With the decommissioning of the Plymouth nuclear power station underway, the town of Plymouth has become a de facto spent nuclear waste dump. The spent nuclear fuel is being stored in casks in close proximity to Cape Cod Bay on Rocky Hill Road in Plymouth. The casks will ultimately store approximately around 4,100 spent nuclear fuel assemblies when the process of moving the radioactive material from the now closed plant into the casks is completed. Each cask weighs about 300,000 pounds when fully loaded. Holtec International, the manufacturer of the casks, provides a 25-year warranty for the casks. The spent nuclear fuel remains dangerously radioactive for about 10,000 years. There is no plan for moving the casks and spent nuclear fuel. There is a local, regional, and national public health, public safety, and financial problem, but the sole responsibility and authority to solve the problem rests solely with the federal government. The Federal Department of Energy is legally and ultimately responsible for the permanent storage of spent nuclear fuel. Despite the federal mandate contained in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982, nearly 40 years ago, the DOE has not created a permanent national repository to store this material. As a result, the federal government has already paid billions of dollars in damages to utilities, not local host communities, for failing to dispose of the waste in accordance with federal law. Only Congress can solve this problem. Since 1991, members of Congress have introduced at least 55 bills in the House and Senate to address this problem. None has ever passed. And with that, I want to introduce my friend, my colleague, Senator Mark Pacheco, Dean of the Massachusetts Senate. He's got the 1st Plymouth and Barnstable district that he represents so vehemently and strong. Senator Pacheco is the founding chair of the Standing Senate Committee on Global Warming and Climate Change. He's been appointed by the Council of State Governments as chair of the Eastern Regional Conference's Energy and Environment Committee, and he serves on the National Conference of State Legislators Task Force on Energy Supply. Senator Pacheco is Senate Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, and he was one of the first members to reach out to me and welcome me very kindly to the board. Senator Pacheco, I'll turn it over to you. I'm going to be heading to a 7 o'clock. Thank you to all of you for listening, and I look forward to continuing to work together.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Senator. Thank you.
Good, good. Well, that's the first question I usually ask with these Zoom meetings and meetings in general, just to make sure it's coming through. Let me thank my colleague and a tremendous leader in her own right, Sue Moran, for the introduction. Although in the introduction she wanted to claim me as part of Barnstable, but my district is the 1st Plymouth and Bristol district, so I represent parts of Bristol County and Plymouth County, while I do spend some time in Barnstable. And I thank her and for her leadership on this, and as she has just gone over a lot of the history relative to spent fuel. It is indeed an issue that people have been struggling with for a long time. I know that many on this panel have been working on this issue for years and have tried to come up with alternatives that will work to move the spent fuel. And I am with everyone tonight because Pine had actually talked to me a couple of times, and I met her at a community meeting where she had asked if I would participate in a discussion with the panel about alternatives with some of these small modular reactors that are coming into the marketplace, or they're trying to, move forward, and what would be the possibility of looking at something like that in the Northeast. Would there be interest, given the urgency of doing everything we can to avoid the worst effects of global climate change? And I explained to her that in my role as a member of the National Conference of State Legislators, I, a few years ago, had the opportunity as a member of the Energy Supply Task Force for the national organization, went to France, to an area just outside Normandy, to actually see how they reuse spent fuel, and had the opportunity to see that. And as somebody that had always been an anti-nuke person and legislator, I was very surprised with what I witnessed and how they would move the fuel and bring it to a facility, reuse the fuel, and it really opened my eyes to something I hadn't had that knowledge about up until that trip. Now, having said that, one of the things that I've looked at over the years is the cost and the security and the safety in transporting fuel and also utilizing it at other sites. They went over those 3 cautionary issues on my trip, and I was actually impressed with some of the work that they were doing. But in looking at climate, I also had a conversation with Pine about the issue with climate is the time, the cost, and the ability to have public buy-in for doing what you, I guess what some people are starting to talk about a little bit in the Northeast. If you had the time to do what is needed, and really our time is quickly running out in terms of putting in place the types of clean energy systems like wind and solar and geothermal and just so many other. I mean, just bringing down demand in general with energy efficiency. Deep dive into energy efficiency here in the Commonwealth and nationally and worldwide, talking about these same issues coming into COP26 in Scotland later on this year, I believe in November. So this is obviously an international issue people are talking about, ways in which you might be able to use modular nuclear reactors. And I am not an energy expert, that's for sure. I have the opportunity to serve, as was referenced, as the chair of the Council of State Governments East Energy and Environmental panel, and I sit on the Energy Supply Task Force with the National Conference of State Legislators. And we are looking at all of these things. The CSG East, we are involved with the 11 northeastern states, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and the eastern provinces in Canada. They're all members of our organization, and we're talking about climate and trying to avoid the worst case scenario relative to climate all the time. We're having forums. There is one of our members of the staff at CSG that actually is doing some work, and I believe he has communicated with Pine directly as a result of some outreach, and he is actually doing some work with the Department of Energy on these very issues, and the concern that he has brought to me and some of the staff at CSG have brought to me is the significant cost of the auction and the time to get these plans in place. But so I'm really here tonight to listen and try to answer some questions. Pine had asked me if I would come to listen to some proposals, some suggestions, and maybe a way that we could create a conversation with Council of State Government legislators. I'm certainly willing to have the conversation and talk about these issues. I find that I'm always learning more that I can bring back not only to my district, but to this issue in general. The final point I want to make is that the former Secretary of Energy, Moniz, and who is an engineer and very, very involved in the subject matter, is at MIT and is doing a project called the Roosevelt Project over there. And they're working on these issues a lot. And so I'm not sure if there's been any outreach from this decommissioning citizens advisory panel to MIT, but that might be another opportunity for discussion as you move forward. So let me stop and just thank you for thinking enough of me to ask me to join you and have a bit of a discussion and say how lucky you are to have Senator Moran representing all of you and your interests. She's been a dynamic leader and somebody that has a great future in the Massachusetts Senate. She just is a pleasure to work with and a dynamic individual. So again, let me turn it back to the chair.
Thank you so very much, Senator, both senators. So, this is something that I personally have been struggling with a lot because not only of the burden that we have relative to climate change, and I absolutely agree with you that it will take time. I also know that MIT has been working on this issue. I just haven't had any connection with them and don't really know how to get to the information. But if you help me, I will.
Be pleased to.
And the issue for us here in Plymouth, and with Yankee Row and soon with Vermont Yankee and Maine Yankee and Millstone, which is your co-chair, is in Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken, at CSG. Oyster Creek and Indian Point, New York, and I know that there's 9 reactors up there on Lake Ontario. So the Northeast is going to be overburdened with spent nuclear fuel. And as Senator Moran had said, there have been 51 proposals to address it, and none of them have passed Congress. So that's why I invited Congressman Keating's excellent chief of staff here tonight to help us weigh in on this, because I realize that, this is not something that I have any thought of dumping on CSG East. But I do think that Congress only responds when the grass is growing from the roots. And I feel like, the amount of interest that we have in this region for truly addressing the nuclear waste is pretty broad and deep. And we do not want it to sit on the hill until it drowns in the bay. Losing the battle with climate change, as you have been so engaged in all this time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I grew up in New York. I don't want New York to suffer, I not far from Tarrytown am I, and not far from Indian Point. I went swimming in the Hudson. I care about all these sites, and I know Holtec has a big interest in all of this as they're doing all this decommissioning. But they're going to just store the stuff until somebody gets their act together and gives them a path forward. It's expensive and it's time-consuming. My thought about CSG East, when I saw that, I was delighted, that there is a forum for such things, for a way to bring academia and industry together to solve a problem. And then I learned about France and its ability to reuse and reprocess its fuel, and then I just saw that the IAEA in 2019 reissued a whole guidance document on reprocessing. I think that there's got to be a way for the brains of today to solve the failures of yesterday, and to develop a way for us to resolve this nuclear waste problem without dumping it on the indigenous people in some other part of the country. It's not going to work. It'll never happen. Yucca Mountain hasn't gotten anywhere. It's not the way forward. So one way or the other, whether it's reprocessing or some other effort, I believe that your forum in CSG East is an excellent opportunity for us to actually investigate another path forward other than tearing our hair out and spending all our time trying to catch Holtec in some misdemeanor that says, oh, you're not watching out for us. They want to watch out for us because they want to use that industrial waste. I want them to use the industrial waste in a way that saves humanity and the planet at the same time. And that's why I asked you all here tonight. So my hope is that you, in your capacity as chair, will talk to your co-chair and potentially ask that big forum for how can we get to MIT and have that, or support MIT by talking to the industry, talk to NEI, talk to the people that have the money to support the inquiries and the investigation and the innovation that is necessary. And then we can make Congressman Keating do his work and maybe outlaw uranium mining in the country so there's no other opportunity to get the stuff. That's my bright idea. How about it, Mike Jackman? Can you help us out?
Thank you, Pine. And it's great to hear from Senator Moran and Senator Pacheco, and certainly Senator Pacheco. I'm looking forward to following up with you on some of the ideas you talked about and some of the ideas that Pine has been mentioning. I had a chat with Congressman Keating today. Unfortunately, he's in D.C. The House is in session, as I think we all know. If we're following the news at all, very, very intense negotiations going on this week, and he is down there. But we had a chance to talk a little bit about this, and he is familiar with the modular nuclear plant concept. It's very, as Pine alluded to, it's very popular in Europe. And Congressman Keating is the chair of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Europe, Eurasia, Energy, and the Environment. So it is something that has come across his transom, if you will, in his capacity there. So certainly not something, I personally was not familiar with it until Pine mentioned it to me a few weeks back, and did a little digging into it. I'm going to be following up with the Foreign Affairs staff to get their sense of where the committee is on that, see if there's any excuse me, as Pine and I discussed, the NRC is not doing any rulemaking currently. They stopped rulemaking for reprocessing nuclear fuel, maybe looking into that as well. But again, similar to Senator Pacheco, I'm glad to be here tonight and also to listen to other ideas that folks might have about this concept. Thank you.
Mary?
Yes, thank you both for being here. It's nice to see you, Senator Pacheco. I used to see you a whole lot, and obviously I appreciate you being here. I will start off by saying reprocessing is not the answer to our spent waste problem, and I will go into that. As a reminder, decades ago, President Truman put a halt to reprocessing because they recognized that there was enough weapons-grade plutonium in the world, and we did not need any more. It was a nuclear and remains a nuclear proliferation issue. The GIO report issued 4 days ago dealt with spent fuel storage issues. Please note, reprocessing was not among suggestions. Reprocessing is not the answer because it produces numerous additional waste streams that have to be managed. It's exceedingly expensive. It's exceedingly polluting and increases, as I said, nuclear waste proliferation. Expensive based on French and Japanese experience, the cost of producing, recycling, and reprocessing is several times that of producing fresh uranium reactor fuel. In the past, about half of France's reprocessing capacity was used to process spent fuel from foreign reactors. Because of the exceedingly high cost, virtually all of those foreign customers have decided to follow the U.S. example and simply store their used fuel. The French reprocessing company, Areva, claims its method reduces the volume and longevity of radioactive waste. But when you take into account of the additional radioactive waste streams created by reprocessing and plutonium recycling, the volume is not reduced. Most of the recycled plutonium is neither destroyed nor reused. Its makeup makes it difficult to use in existing reactors, so Areva stores most of it at its reprocessing plant. Dangerous. When you were in France, did you notice the surface-to-air missiles around the reprocessing facility that were put in place post 9/11? A huge security threat for the United States, for the Northeast. Do we want it when we know the risk of terrorism is increasing in the future, not decreasing? Leaks from the reprocessing facilities. The biggest experiment in reprocessing was at Sellafield in England. In 2005, after decades of contamination and leaks into the ocean, air, and land around the reprocessing plant, Sellafield was shut down because a bigger than usual leak dissolved in nitric acid, some tens of thousands of gallons, was discovered. It contained enough plutonium to make 20 nuclear bombs. Radioactive leaks are documented around the reprocessing in France. Nuclear proliferation. Bob Alvarez, former Department of Energy official and national expert on nuclear issues, summarized reprocessing this way. Reprocessing plants release about 15,000 times more radioactivity into the environment than nuclear power plants and generate waste with high decay heat. Other efforts to build what is called a closed fuse cycle, where waste is recycled and reused in reactors, have failed for 50 years. Such failure has left about 250 tons of excess plutonium stored at reprocessing plants around the world, enough for some 30,000 nuclear weapons. It's time to accept that a once-through nuclear fuel cycle, where spent fuel is put into permanent geological storage, is the only sensible solution. I also would direct you to the 2012 Blue Ribbon Commission report that talked about the importance of setting for scientific requirements for either an interim and permanent repository, and the importance of consent. The mere thought that these so-called cute nuclear reactors are ever going to be built in Massachusetts is a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream that the public is going to accept it. Look what happened in Maryland. Look what's happened when efforts have been made to restart the nuclear power program. Colossal waste of money, waste of time, waste of efforts, and in Massachusetts, of all places, where we could have good jobs and having truly clean energy. This is where your efforts should go. Otherwise, it's another pipe dream, another delay, and nobody does anything. And I can send you
Thank you, Mary.
reams of reports.
So,
Sen-
so I understand about the, about all of those things. And, you know, I also understand that the great idea of storing it in a geological thing, either temporarily or permanently, is not going anywhere either. And as far as expense is concerned, the expense is already borne. We have it on our shoulders right now, and we have to deal with it. So my question is, how are we going to deal with it? And my answer is, I am not going to deal with it by shoving it on to somebody else that didn't enjoy the energy, that didn't bring the power plant here, that didn't, you know, turn its lights on and run its computers 24/7.
Then shove it on.
We have an obligation to try to address the nuclear waste in our backyard. And the Northeast has a tremendous amount of it. My question to CSG East, which is a tremendous forum for answering questions and providing education, is how can you help us? Can you bring more light to the day? Can you update whatever it is from 2012? The fact that IAEA wrote something up in 2019 trumps 2012 in my book. I think that we have a lot more knowledge today than we had before. We know that we can't reprocess in the way we did before, and it wasn't Truman, it was Carter that outlawed it because they didn't want to make uranium, plutonium a target of terrorism. Well, that cat is out of the barn. There are 6 countries that are reprocessing spent nuclear fuel. Whether we become one of them or not, I have no idea. I am not advocating for it. What I'm advocating for is addressing our nuclear stockpile of waste that is every bit as dangerous as what you're talking about. And it's not going to go away until we, the people, deal with it. So let's get off the dime and start working. Don't you have something to say?
I'm fine. Let me, okay. Senator Pacheco, thank you for participating tonight. I know we lost Senator Moran a few minutes ago. Senator, have you ever had the opportunity to tour the facility?
I have. Am I still on here?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right, yeah. Yes, I have many, many years ago, and certainly would welcome the opportunity again. But I want to make sure my presence here is not that of somebody that's advocating one way or the other here. It's more in responding to, you know, Pine and the Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel's interest in asking me to, you know, to be here to share information that I've had the opportunity to take in with everyone in the interest that I thought the panel would want to have with legislators in the Northeast that are all dealing with the same problem in terms of spent fuel that is waste in their particular jurisdictions within the Northeast. As I said, CSG represents the 11 Northeastern states and the eastern provinces in Canada, et cetera. And one of the things that we do from time to time is have educational forums in terms of what is taking place. Now, in terms of what the feds are doing, and Mike Jackman would know a lot more about this than I do, and certainly the extraordinary congressman we have in Congressman Keating. I had the privilege of serving with him in the Massachusetts legislature when he was in the legislature. And I know he cares very deeply about these issues. And the Department of Energy is right now looking at where they could go with spent fuel in terms of storage. And I'm not talking about Yucca Mountain, but it's actually an interest that's coming from Texas. And I think there's another state that they're looking at where the state themselves is asking about it. So that's being looked at, now, and I have no idea what the prognosis on that looks like. What they may be seeing, as Senator Moran said at the outset, we've been hearing and reading about, options that were going to happen for 50 years or so. So it isn't something that is going to spin on a dime here, and we're going to see major changes take place in time, in my opinion, for doing what we need to do to help solve the worst effects of global climate change. That is, my interest. I think what Mary said earlier is very important. We have the technology out there and available today to move away very quickly. We just need the political will to move quickly with wind and solar and geothermal and hydro to a certain extent, energy efficiency and deep dives in energy efficiency to bring down the demand of energy in the first place. And we're working on those. Do I think we're working on them fast enough? Absolutely not. We're not anywhere close to be doing what we need to be doing, and we really need to kick it up. And those that may be on the panel from our own state agencies in energy and in the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, they've done a good job relative to the policy, but man, not anywhere close to where we need to be in terms of actually, getting things out the door and doing what we need to do to meet these deadlines of 2030 and 2050. I mean, 2030 is right around the corner, and we're not anywhere close to getting to decarbonization by 50% for 2030. And that's what our recommendation and our requirement is in Massachusetts state statute. Getting back to the waste, product and spent fuels, I did visit Normandy and that region of France. I did see what they were doing with spent fuels, and just one correction: if they weren't using spent fuels, they would have twice the waste. So they were reusing waste, not bringing in new product to then use to have more spent fuel. They were using spent fuel and going forward with it. That's what surprised me as to how much energy they were able to derive with the reuse, process that actually diluted the opportunity for nuclear proliferation with what was left over from the waste product. I am not here to advocate for heading in that direction. Let me just make that very clear. I am here to try to facilitate, if needed, any dialogue between some of the premier higher education institutions in the world and the regional entity that our legislators belong to, if in fact that's what you choose to do. And I can't even guarantee that if the staff and folks are not on board because of some of the contracts they may have with DOE. But I can guarantee you that I will try to put together a forum if you want to do that, and if that's what Senator Moran wants to do. This is, it's everybody's problem, but it is her district where the spent fuel is at the facility in Plymouth, and it's also the district of the congressman that represents our region, and I want to work with them and try to be helpful in any way that I can. So I'm here to be helpful, not advocating, not telling you what to do, but rather listening and trying to be helpful in any way that I can. So thank you.
Could I make a suggestion? And the suggestion would be that if you put together a panel, and thank you for that idea, that the panel also include advocates and those who have responsible positions and are respected. I mentioned Alvarez, who had been with DOE, et cetera, to also be on the panel. So you hear both sides. It's sort of like at law school, the case control method, where you hear both sides. So the public and legislators would come out in a better position to make up their own minds. Just a suggestion.
Senator,
Thank you, Mary.
I appreciate
Yes,
your
sir.
comments. So obviously, if you need another site visit, we can facilitate that if you want to come down and, see what's currently going on site since you've last been there. I'm sure Mr. O'Brien could facilitate that with no problem. The other thing is, Senator Moran in her opening comments, hit the nail on the head when she referenced that the town of Plymouth is and has been for a long time a de facto nuclear waste dump. So
Yep.
your comment about, facilitating discussion and trying to bring people together, that's what Ms. Dubois was trying to do.
Exactly, yes.
This is a different entity. It's a different avenue that hasn't been, looked at yet. Anything you can do to facilitate discussion, that's what we're trying to do. This issue is coming down to the spent fuel and the long-term disposition of that. Unfortunately, for 40 to 50 years, the federal government has abdicated its responsibility and its promises that was made to these communities as these facilities were coming online from the early to mid-60s to the late 70s. And we're not alone. And you have, some inroads with, an entity that handles the Northeastern United States. So anything you can do moving forward is certainly greatly appreciated. Turn it over to Dave Nichols.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think this is an interesting debate and discussion, and it's probably important because the citizens of Plymouth, including myself, live down the street from this stuff. But I'm also a believer that science is ultimately going to lead us out of this. It's not going to be a debate over where the waste goes because nobody wants it. So we have to look at advances in science, and that, I think, is ultimately going to provide the solution. You look at the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy, and they've got an Office of Spent Fuel and Waste Science and Technology. They fund research in this area. My guess is that it's not an area that gets paid a lot of attention to in the federal budget. We're in the process of debating in Washington, a $3.5 trillion, whatever the number today is, infrastructure bill. And there's probably very little in there about waste remediation and research and development. And we've seen just in the last 18 months what's happened with COVID, and how science has kind of advanced to the point to allow us to fight some of those issues. And I believe that the scientists, if they put their heads together and they get the research and they get the money to do the funding, can find solutions to this problem that don't take us down the road of, we're going to ship it here or we're going to ship it there. And it's really just a question of money. If you look at how the process works, the Department of Energy gets the money, they fund it out to, some of the brains at the national labs that are out there that are working on these issues, of the universities like MIT that are working on this issue. And that's where we're going to find a solution. So if we think about, things that could be productive, Senator Pacheco, I really appreciate you being on this call, looking at whether CSG East and the delegation from the Northeast in particular, communicates the importance of research and development funding, and communicates that to folks like Congressman Keating and others in the delegations in the Northeast, so that when we advance a funding bill every year in Congress, that we make sure there's enough money in there to adequately fund the necessary research and development that's going to lead us down the road of being able to remediate some of this waste. So, I think it's an important debate, but if we're looking for some concrete actions that we can all work on together, I think that that's something that would be, an interesting discussion at CSG East and would probably lead to a more interesting discussion in Washington on providing the funding and, the science that's necessary to solve some of these problems.
Seth, Mr. Pickering, you have any comments on this?
No, I do not. It's interesting to, hear the different things that people are saying, but, in terms of, a position, I'm listening. It's interesting to hear, what the potential benefits are for any type of solution, but certainly, where we are is, right now, the long-term storage is going to be at the facility.
I think the reason I was asking the chair to call on you, Seth, had to do with the fact that you're the appointee of the Executive Secretary of Environmental Affairs, and I'm hoping that you'll take some of this conversation back to her, both as your capacity as her appointee as well as the IWG representative, because I think it's important that we stay in touch with the executive office, and that, if the senator is able to help us in the regional capacity, then he certainly needs the Commonwealth, behind him every step of the way. And I have a belief in this Commonwealth that we know how to solve problems and address problems. It's part of the reason why I came and part of the reason why I stayed here. So I'm hoping that you'll take it back and have a long conversation with Secretary.
Yeah, so Pine, yeah, for sure I will. I will make sure that, I manage the information back up through the channels that are available to me, that, identify, that this is a concern and there are a lot of potential different ways it could be looked at.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Smith?
Make sure your microphone is turned on.
It goes back 70 years. It goes back to Dwight Eisenhower and his Atoms for Peace program, which was the first federal address of climate and atmosphere. And it was to address smog, which was chemical contamination of the atmosphere we breathed, and people were dying of that at that time. But my own history, very briefly, started in 1969 at Pilgrim, and at that time there were regional organizations, and they talked about the disposal, and they talked about using the sun, sending it into space, deep ocean burial, geological burial in because we knew enough about the earth at that time and plate tectonics, or reuse. And then, of course, as the good co-chair said, it was President Carter stopping the non-proliferation of plutonium, who stopped the possibility of recycling, which was going on. There were efforts being made. So all of these have really all been pursued before, and as the good senator said, it's the political will that needs to be developed. Because you don't have just Pilgrim, you have 100 commercial sites across America. And they're all, those communities are sitting on these accumulations of waste. What to do? Perhaps one might consider a suggestion is that at these local levels, okay, I don't think the decision is going to come out of here no matter how much education we get from MIT. MIT has a lot of literature that they've always shared. That we need that political will at the federal level, that they're not going to leave us stranded. That's just my perspective. Thank you.
So, just one last comment to Mr. Pacheco and Mr. Jackman specifically. Senator and Mike, we've had people in the past characterize our determination to remove the fuel from the community as kind of a NIMBY behavior, and I couldn't disagree more. Promises were made 50 to 70 years ago with respect to this material from the federal government. I said it earlier, the federal government abdicated their responsibility. As Mr. Smith just said, there's 100 communities out there that have this material sitting there, doing nothing. Certainly, speaking for myself, it's not my intention to advocate or do whatever I could to have it put into a poorer community somewhere else so that it impacts them in a negative way and it's out of our backyard. I know people in the community who have been out to Yucca Mountain in Nevada. I've questioned these individuals. What do you see when you drive out, when you drove out to that facility? And, it's just, they just drive for miles and miles and miles and they see nothing but desert. So Mr. Nichols was talking about the science. I want to believe, and it's difficult in an environment which is increasingly polarized, but I want to believe that the science exists where our federal government could step up and have that long-term solution somewhere where it's not negatively impacting any community, whether it be their air quality, their water quality, or their overall quality of life. So, having said that, I can't thank you enough, Mr. Pacheco, Senator, for taking the time out to attend tonight's meeting.
Could I please say one thing? I am a NIMBY and proud of it. And I hate the perfect to get in the way of the good, number one. I think that's a thought to consider. But I think, Senator Pacheco, and this also would go for Senator Moran, it is, the waste is here now. And there are positive things the state legislature can do now to make it safer. For example, Senate Bill 1507, which is in the Joint Committee of Public Health that Senator Moran sits as the Senate Vice Chair, would require additional monitoring for the CAS. So there would be a heads-up, real-time monitoring data that would go to the Mass Department of Public Health, to the Commonwealth, to give a heads-up in case something went wrong. And the longer it stays here, the greater the likelihood of corrosion of the thin canisters from exposure to the marine environment can occur. And, God forbid, a terrorist attack. And so I think it's important to think at the same time more locally what does the state have the authority to do? Certainly to advocate, which we appreciate that you're doing, but also to work hard to get legislation that would increase the safety of the spent fuel that we have now, and advocate for greater security, because we know that waste can be targeted with weapons available, shot from off-site at considerable distance. So there are things to do here and what you're doing in a larger level, and we appreciate that.
Okay, everyone who logged
Mike.
in tonight on Zoom with respect to this agenda item, I thank you for attending tonight, and we're going to move on to Patrick O'Brien.
If I could say one final thing, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Senator, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, thank you and thank Pine and Mary and everybody that was involved. I think one of the gentlemen, I didn't catch his name, and I apologize, talked about science. And, you know, there's no question about it. Science will help us as we move forward with this issue. And the science may in fact be there to tell us what we should be doing. And I think it does go back to, you know, political will in terms of what we need to do. I just want to let you know that Senator Moran, when I was invited, I had expressed to Pine that I would not be attending without the invitation of Senator Moran, because it, you know, is her district. While it's an issue that goes beyond any one district, it still is, you know, the part of the Commonwealth that she represents very, very well. And going back to Senator Murray and Senator and other senators that have represented the area, Senator Moran is doing an outstanding job on this issue and getting your concerns to those of us that care about these issues as well. So I'm more than willing to work at the state level. There are some things that we can do around the edges, as Mary had indicated. But, you know, the federal government through the Department of Energy, and I think there's a lot that's going on right now in terms of the Department of Energy that a lot of people, including people on this panel, including me, are not fully aware of that is being done. You know, does that mean something's going to happen next week? No. But it was brought to my attention in preparing for tonight's meeting that there are discussions going on, you know, presently with interested parties, you know, nationally, and the contract that CSG has had with a staff person and DOE does not allow them to discuss any of the research, anything that is going on. But I do believe that there is activity on this issue, trying to move forward and trying to solve this waste problem. Let me just conclude by saying I know Congressman Keating very well, and he will want to do everything he can to be responsive. That's why Mike Jackman is here. Couldn't have a better person representing him in dealing with these issues. I will be more than happy to try to be helpful on this. If you want to have some dialogue with legislators from other states, I can just tell you that the biggest problem that you have with this issue is people, you know, and I'll use myself as an example. Somebody would invite me to see something or about a new nuclear facility. You know, I wouldn't even want to return the phone call. I was an anti-nuclear person, and I still am, in terms of looking at new facilities because of the cost, because of the time factor, because of the waste stream. Just think for a second, if we did not have a problem with the waste stream, we would have nuclear facilities that we wouldn't have a climate change problem, because we would have utilized this technology much more significantly than we have at this point in time, especially if we were able to isolate the nuclear proliferation related issues involved. So I don't want anybody to think when I'm here that I'm a pro-nuclear guy. Very much the opposite. However, I am a pro-solutions guy relative to the waste stream. And, you know, within that context, I'll be pleased to try to work with Senator Moran and Congressman Keating on anything we can do to bring some dialogue and some better understanding, and maybe stimulate some political will to get a solution here. So thank you very much, and I'm going to head off unless there's any further question from me. I have to get on another meeting myself. Thank you very much.
My personal thanks to you, Senator Pacheco. Thank you very much for all your time and effort and energy in this. I appreciate it. Have a great
Thank you.
week. Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
All right, good. Thank you. Good evening. I'll be presenting the update related to decommissioning at the Pilgrim Station for the September meeting. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with this. This is our waterfall with our streams for work. The one I really want to focus on this month is right in here. This is the second fuel campaign that we've been undertaking at the site. So right now, we've completed 17 of 34 casts for this campaign, so we are halfway through the campaign. That's 45 total casts out of the 62 that will be loaded for all of Pilgrim spent fuel pool. It's a little over 70% of the fuel that was in the pool at one point has been loaded into dry casks. Yeah, it's on, sorry. Cask 18 is loaded. It's up on the refuel floor today. They're doing the welding, drying, and backfilling, and we'll be loading cask 19 at the end of this week. 14 casks, including 2 today, have been loaded to the upper asphyxie pad. Pine was nice enough to come down and join me and see cask 13 come up this morning. The fuel campaign is still on track to be completed in November as scheduled, and all the unloaded systems that we will need are on site already, so nothing else has to come to site to finish this campaign. And we do have the 2 greater than Class C non-fuel waste containers that will follow the campaign in December to be loaded. And that picture right there is actually the first cast that went uploaded to the pad. That's on the back of the Goldhofer that is coming through the vehicle barrier and the protected area there. So demolition. Since our last meeting, we have not done any further building demolition. We do have some projected demolition for the remainder of 2021 and early 2022, and continue to work with both state and local agencies related to any remediation or issues related to those buildings. So we have the Fitness for Duty Medical Building in the October-November timeframe. There is some asbestos abatement that we'll be working through in that building. The air-off gas building, we've removed the building internals. The SEP diesel building will come down in November. The old admin building, we're looking at November timeframe in addition. That has some asbestos that we'll be remediating ahead of time. One of the big changes to the site will be when we get into the main warehouse demolition, and that's what these pictures are. That was part of the warehouse. It's kind of hard to see when some of the racks were still full. We've undertaken a big clean-out project of all the old equipment and ancillary parts and extra parts that were needed in that warehouse over the 47-year. I've seen way too many tags that still have Boston Edison names on a number of those things before they were removed. The operations and maintenance building, which is actually attached to the main warehouse, that'll come down following the main warehouse building. And then across, adjacent to the switchyard, there's a two-story Butler building we'll be looking to take down in January of 2022. In parallel to our fuel campaign, we've been able to get some additional reactor segmentation work completed. So up top, I've kind of put this slide up before where we've kind of walked our way through the reactor segmentation. So for the ease of this, we're about 2/3 of the way through the reactor. The key activity we're doing right now is the crushing of these riser tubes. So this is a round tube here, and then crushing them. That's a waste reduction. Those are in the dryer separator pit right now, and then those will be packaged and removed. So far we're through 29 of 154 of those, looking to do that work through October in parallel and with the fuel work up on the floor. We continue to be active in our waste management, and we have done some additional shipping. That picture there is a Class B resin shipment that went out last month, I believe. Jack Priest can tell me if I'm wrong. We had a long discussion on that, but that did go from Pilgrim down to WCS in Texas, and to date we've shipped a number of different types of containers, dry active waste, concrete shield blocks. All the concrete shield blocks that had previously covered the reactor when it was operating, those have been cut up and removed from the site, and we're working through that. So we're making good progress with that work. And then I'll just ask John Drabinski from ERM just to touch on the slide, just to kind of give an update on where we are with site characterization.
Thank you, Patrick. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So the work plan for the amended ESA was submitted in May of 2020, and it contained two tasks. One, the main parcel under Phase 1A, which is a continuation of the Phase 1 activities. And second phase, Phase 2, was the licensed perimeter area. Under Phase 1A, we collected soil samples and installed 7 new groundwater monitoring wells, with 3 additional wells to be drilled and constructed. And we plan to sample all 10 wells and be sampling for the same parameters and chemicals that we sampled for in initial activities in Phase 1. In Phase 2, the limited perimeter area, we've collected soil samples, installed 4 additional new groundwater monitoring wells, and again, we'll be sampling those wells for the same parameters that we sampled in Phase 1A, which, as everyone remembers, triggered the RTN for the property. We hope that field work for Phase 1A and 2 activities will be completed by the end of October 2020, and the data will be coming in. Will get validated, and we'll be reporting out any exceedances of the MCP criteria, and look forward to discussing that data and information with you as we go forward. So, Patrick, thank you very much, and I think that hopefully covers that aspect of the site environmental investigation.
Thanks, John. And that's all I have for this month.
So I have a question that might answer my question that I was trying to get out during the minutes thing. John, in Jack's presentation 2 months ago, or his discussion 2 months ago, and it says it in the minutes, there's no groundwater on site. But all these groundwater wells are telling me that there's groundwater on site. And my history looking at the site says there's groundwaters on site. So I do trust Jack Priest, but I'm not sure what he was differentiating in what he was saying during that site characterization and your discussion now.
So this is Jack. What I said was that groundwater doesn't cross-connect with the drinking water pathway.
Aha.
That hydrology goes out to the bay.
The hydrology on site.
And I'll let the ERM people describe that characterization. But what I said was, we've been doing groundwater monitoring for tritium as part of that NEI directive for, I don't know, since 2007, I think. And they've added additional wells now as part of this decommissioning. So we know, the movement of water pretty well on site, And as we're so close to the ocean, we know that it doesn't move towards the nearest drinking water pathway, which I forget the distance. I want to say 3 miles, but ERM can clarify that.
So Jack, while I have you on the line, just so I can correct the minutes for Tori and EEA, can I say there is no groundwater drinking water wells on site? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. I'll let
right.
ERM.
That is
Anyone-
correct. That is correct. There are no drinking water wells on site.
That
Just so
clarifies the
everyone-
point. Thank you.
Okay. Just so that everyone realizes, but the DEP classifies the aquifer underneath the site as a drinking water aquifer, and that's why we're looking at GW1 criteria for reporting.
I don't think that's. I don't think that's correct, Gerard.
No, it's not. The MCP classifies it as a potential drinking water aquifer because of the transmissivity. It's high transmissivity, and therefore has a sufficient amount of water to be used as a drinking water if there's no other issues. If somebody proposed, like the town of Plymouth proposed to put a public well in there, our water supply folks would come out and say it's probably not the best place for a public well. But it's only because the transmissivity of the aquifer is high, it's considered potential drinking water. It is not a current drinking water source area.
And just so we're clear and not guessing, what is the closest drinking water well to the site?
I'd have to look at the GIS map, Gerard, I don't have the top of my head.
I can't hear you, John.
We'd have to look at a GIS map. Off the top of my head, I don't recall the exact distance, but it's a fair ways away.
Yeah, it's a good distance.
You're talking
in
about
the opposite direction.
You're talking about residential or municipal?
You're talking about an existing well within the water system.
Your point, yeah.
He's shaking his head no.
Can one of you follow up on describing for us where the closest drinking water well anyone is using currently to the site?
We will get that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary?
Yes, a question. What is the status of DEP and DPH's comments on the site assessment plan and approval thereof?
We have not received them, but I will let Seth speak to where they are in process.
I'm going to speak to him when Patrick's done. So
Is Patrick done?
it's one of my
It's on the
items
agenda.
to talk about on the agenda.
Okay.
And you're right on time, too, so go for it, Seth.
Is
Can I ask a
Patrick
question
done?
to Pat
Sorry,
first?
sorry.
Not to, I know everybody's excited to hear that, Seth, so. Pat, could you go back to the slide that shows all the buildings you're taking down? I mean, you're really, it seems like you're accelerating the rate of buildings that, or at least the pace is increasing of the number of buildings you guys are taking down. Are you expected to find, or is there any radioactive waste that's generated out of the demolition of any of those buildings?
We take that into account ahead of time. I believe the AOG one would have been the only one that would have, there might have been a small radiologically controlled area in the warehouse at one time. But that's part of the process before as we go through the process to abandon, work with both DEP and DPH on removal of those buildings. We're looking at any of those types of hazards, radiological, environmental type hazards, where I spoke to asbestos. That's pretty much the majority. Asbestos PCBs, those are what we're finding and working through that process.
So when you do the demolition.
Pat, the short answer is yes.
Says the former radiological protection
So
manager.
when you do the demolition of these buildings, how do you manage the dust that's created as a result of the demolition of these buildings?
So majority of these, I'll say everything short of the old exec and AOG are sheet metal buildings. The old exec is concrete. That did not have radiological in them. That does have asbestos, so we're working through that process. But there's dust mitigation in any demolition of any building, and those controls are based on kind of what hazards are there. So we work through that process. There's a way we have to follow to do it the right way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I guess before I do want to add one thing. I probably should have put it in my slide. I did it last month. We do continue to host guests to come visit. I was pleased to have the League of Women Voters, Plymouth, come down and tour the site, and then we did have a couple members of DEP and DPH come down to site and tour as well. So it's probably my last little spiel for the month. And I already mentioned that you were there today, Pine. So you, that's true too.
Do you have monitors when you're taking them down? To follow up on your question.
I would double check with RP. I know they're surveyed before they come down, so it goes through that process to identify what's there, if there's anything there.
Yeah, but
before
when it
comes
comes down for where it's going.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, it's
what
all
I'm-
surveyed before it leaves site. Like, I'll use the main stack as an example. We presumed that to be radiological. We knew it had asbestos in it, so we took it down in accordance with the procedures to deal with something that would have both of those materials. Ultimately, when the main stack was surveyed, it could have been free released, but because it had the asbestos, we treated it as the asbestos-containing material to final disposal. We went conservative and brought it to West Texas in the radiological controlled disposal area.
If you have radiological stuff in a building that's coming down, do the workers have badges just for precaution or not?
Badges or?
To.
Yeah, no, anytime in a radiologically controlled area, we have our TLDs, our thermoluminescent dosimeters, plus the real-time dosimeters. So anytime you enter the radiologically controlled area, you have both of those on. So, yes. And depending on what the cleanup, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, so part of the tour, we looked at that. We looked at the workers. We interacted with some of the workers that were working in the reactor building on that tour. But radiologically, similar to other hazardous materials, for Mr. Nichols' question, they'll use fixatives, they'll use tents, they'll have air sampling, air monitors. They'll use air monitors for radiological. I'm sure they use air monitors for the asbestos or other hazard monitors as well. They're very controlled work that they do in those small areas. So I know the radiological areas that are going to come down with those buildings, I'd classify those as low risk, very small areas where they had things like sealed sources stored, and then they'll clean up those areas and monitor as they work through the disposal.
Thanks, Jack.
That's some of the things that we're doing oversight on when we come down and do our site visits. I'll walk into the radiologically restricted areas, and we were watching how the workers worked, how the areas were set up, how things were posted, what equipment they were using, how were they protecting the construction crews that were doing the work, and monitoring those people as well. And
Okay,
we
thank
were satisfied with no comments on the last tour.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Pickering? And I just got a text message saying that the closest municipal well is the Wanos well to the power plant, and the exact distance from the plant is, that person doesn't have at the tip of their fingers right now, but I could certainly provide that at the next meeting.
Let's have ERM bring that back so it's official when it's in the notes and we don't have to revisit it again.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Pickering?
Are you ready for me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give the interagency work group update for today. I asked Patrick to leave the demolition schedule up because I'm going to touch on that in what we're talking about. So first thing is on the site assessment work plan. We, as Mass DEP and Department of Public Health, we've completed our review of the ESA work plan that's been submitted by Holtec, and we will be working with the Attorney General's office to formulate a formal response, which will be provided to Holtec shortly. Once that is issued, our group will provide the NDCAP with copies for further dissemination. And we acknowledge correspondence that's been received from interested parties, including the Lamperts, and have considered them in compiling the state's comments. Just a little bit of background on the demolition aspect of things and the interactions with Mass DEP. Mass DEP asbestos people have been working closely with Holtec and the facility, meeting with them usually on a 2-week basis. There are processes of notification and permitting that are involved with the whole demolition process, which includes initial notification that identifies which buildings are targeted for demolition. They're all going to be required to get an asbestos survey. Once those surveys are done and sent to the department, they will be reviewed by the department. Then moving forward from that, there are local notifications, state notifications that need to be done in a timely manner so that there can be review of these notifications by the department and the building department here in the town of Plymouth as well, before any work can be done moving forward with either the abatement of asbestos or asbestos-containing materials in these buildings and or the demolition of the buildings once they are actually identified as being clear for demolition because the asbestos has been properly abated. So I just want, I think it can go to some of the questions that I've been hearing. There is a process involved. Each step needs to be taken care of, and to be, to be brief, all these facilities, all these buildings will need to be looked at as to whether or not they contain asbestos-containing material or asbestos proper, and all of that asbestos will have to be abated in accordance with the regulations, which can be either directly by regulation as required or through what's called a non-traditional work plan, which is a plan that's submitted by a contractor for Holtec that identifies how the process will be done to basically keep the asbestos from being, public exposure. So hopefully that answers some of what I was hearing for questions moving forward. On other items on the report out, we are working with Holtec on response actions related to the notice of responsibilities that was issued back in May pertaining to PFAS. The company has a year to complete response actions related to these releases, and there'll be other things that they need to do moving forward. Holtec's investigation into potential sources of PFAS is ongoing. I don't know, Gerard, do you want to add anything else to that while I'm up here?
Yes, thanks, Seth, if I may. Just a clarification, they have a year to complete the response actions relative to the notification that they had. If they can't complete the response actions within that year, which is a year from the issuance of the NOR, which is this coming spring, they have to tier classify and then start doing comprehensive response actions under the Massachusetts contingency plan. Given that it's PFAS in the groundwater above the appropriate standard, I think it would be tough to get to a permanent solution, but within that year. So on that year, they'll do a phase 1 report and a tier classification and start conducting the more comprehensive response actions under the MCP.
Any questions for Gerard on that?
Where's the PFAS from?
That's part of the...
Isn't that the question? Go ahead, Gerard. That's the big question, though, right?
That is a good question. As Seth mentioned, part of what they're doing is trying to identify the potential sources of PFAS. That's certainly part of the, if you can do it as part of the phase 1, that's great. If not, the phase 2 requires identification of all sources. If possible, What we're seeing for PFAS out there is pretty low. It's what, in the range of 30 to 40 parts per trillion, John? You know, it doesn't really take that much to be released to have that kind of an impact, and it doesn't appear yet to be that widespread. It may be an incidental use of some material that had PFAS in it, over the life of the power plant. It may be difficult to find the actual source.
Is there a particular location, or is it a little broader than that? Is it a playing field, or is it a spot?
It looks like there's a couple of locations, and the dots don't exactly connect because there's some clean locations between them. Am I correct, John?
You're spot on. I should let you run the site now, Gerard. It's all yours. Gerard is absolutely correct. We probably will not be completing the investigation for the phase 1, so we will definitely be getting into the MCP. So I think Gerard is on point. So.
And what's your capacity to kind of narrow down the component PFAS? My understanding is there's quite a number of those things.
Well, Brian, we'll look at the groundwater flow map, and we'll look at the concentrations, and we'll also look at the different characteristics of PFAS. As you know, there's more than one compound.
I thought, like 9,500 or something ridiculous like that.
And we're only looking at a small variety of those that are regulated by the department, and we'll look at those ratios and see if we can determine a specific source. But the numbers we're dealing with, as Gerard rightfully said, are very, very low, and they're just right above the standard. So it may not be a very simplistic problem, but we'll try to figure out the best we can. You know? As someone on your panel said, you know, we're scientists. We'll use the science to determine where we go. So science is paramount. So we'll get there.
Thank you.
Going back to asbestos, there has been a notice of noncompliance in the past on asbestos-related abatement violations. Holtec has completed all the required actions for the notice of noncompliance. And as I stated earlier, the asbestos section in our Lakeville office is actively engaged in overseeing the demolition activities that have been occurring at the site and will be occurring in the future. We meet with them. We meet with the company regularly to provide guidance on the asbestos mitigation and demolition procedures and processes. So, back in the beginning of the month, Jack Priest from DPH, Gerard and I got a chance to get a partial tour of the site back on September 8th. And we continue to interact with Holtec, at least on a monthly basis, attending production meetings that are tailored to what their schedules are moving forward. And so one of the other things that is moving forward is the visual vehicle bat, or the planting scheme. The department was able to finally give Holtec some guidance on how to proceed. There is a water pollution control issue that's involved up there that will require some permitting because due to the planting of the shrubs that are going to go in, they are going to abandon 12 of the 36 leach pits that currently serve the soil absorption system up there. So they've been given a clear path on what they need to do. They have a plan in place that when the time is right and once the application process is gone through, should be able to be approved. So that process is ongoing. Yep.
So the leaching pits, you said, rather than field?
Yep.
So they're pits. So are you going to plant a plant in the pit to
So-
absorb all that nice nutrient?
So the existing water pollution control facility at the facility is much bigger than it needs to be compared to when it was designed back when the plant was, at full operation. And so back in 2018, when Entergy was still the owner, they were going through process with Mass DEP on the water pollution side of things to deal with some wastewater discharge issues that they had. And there was an administrative consent order, actually, that was entered into with Entergy that stayed with the facility through the purchase. So we're working through the aspects of that order that is still in place, and the requirement to put in the screening plantings up by the where the casts are going to be, and how that all works. One of the proposed method is to plant those where there are 12 existing leach pits, which are not necessary any longer based on the amount of flow and the discharge from the water pollution control facility. So the process to do that got a little held up, needed to get looked at by the Attorney General's office. They get back to the company a couple of months ago, and there was a little bit of time that the new DEP team needed to get up to speed on what all the issues were. And probably about 10 days ago, I gave Patrick what I think is a clear path on what the facility needs to do to move forward with submitting an application to get that done.
But as far as the pollution there, is it radiological, or is it just?
No, it's typical sanitary,
Okay.
sanitary discharge. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. Spent fuel storage if raised. So it sure has been raised. So you caught me by surprise, Pine. I was trying to be a good listener while everybody was doing their thing. So I don't have a position on it, but I just want to let you know, as I said after, EEA is considering your invitation, the NDCAP's invitation to the Secretary, and we will respond directly to the NDCAP on that invitation.
Well, I think that's great. Just heads up, I think NRC is coming next in November, and I think we might ask DOE to show up. So, be fun.
Sure. Well, again, we'll consider it. I'll manage that information up on the invite and the reinforcement that we were hearing again tonight. And we'll see how it goes. We have to stay within our boundaries of what our true charge is here, and so we will do that. Any other questions for me? Pardon me? Okay. Thank you.
Who at NRC?
Excuse me?
Who at NRC?
Oh.
Who'd you ask?
They're going to talk about the
You're going to follow me on this whole introduction to this one. Okay, so moving on, we're almost into the month of October, and we're coming into that time of the year where we have to submit an annual report to the governor, which I believe this would be number 4. We don't meet again, I believe, until the Monday prior to Thanksgiving. And obviously, we have to update the report for, all the activities that encompassed, the 12 months of 2021. So Mr. O'Brien leaves the room, but I do know that Mr. Grassi has volunteered to participate in constructing the report, and we're certainly looking for volunteers or some of the other members of the committee to, take on some of the work with respect to, putting this report together.
So, yes, Rich Grassi was sort of the maestro of organization last year, and he has offered to do that again. And, he went through all of the minutes and organized the topics, if you will. But I think that we also will need, and this is kind of the heads up to folks, the IWG should write their own report. Somebody else shouldn't write the report for the IWG. Eh, Seth?
Yeah, I'll have to check on that.
And I mean, I think
As we discussed the other day on the phone, you know, I'm
I feel
learning as we go.
I feel for you.
So, no, it's fine. And so, yeah, we'll check into that.
Yeah. And I would, and if you can also help me, you know, I would think Seth Schofield at the AG's office or somebody, you know, that the AG should address, you know, the sort of where it's at with the settlement agreement, if you will. Anything they have to say about that, you know, rather than have us make something up. I think Holtec would be the best one to write up, you know, the status of the cleanup, the decommissioning, you know, even the site assessment, as we've been talking about, so that there's some clarity in the report, rather than us trying to just, you know, piece things together out of the minutes. And that was a large part of the way we approached it last year, and it was not only tedious, it was painful. And, you know, I'm not sure that it was as good as it could have been, and at the very end, I realized that we had missed a whole section. So, and I don't want to do that.
Can I just ask one question? When are we snapping the line in the sense that?
It needs to be delivered to the governor and the legislature by the last day of December.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out if I do that, like you're saying, I want to know,
Yeah,
as of October 31st, I'll snap the line and say, here's what we've got for progress in the last year.
I would
That's what I'm
call
trying
it, I would call it the last meeting, so the 22nd of November or something like that, okay?
Okay.
Does that make any sense to everybody?
Sure.
I mean, you know, it's hard to write in December when you're not meeting and stuff like that, but I think that there should be some kind of a review team or something like that, and so the purpose of bringing it up right now is to say, okay, who can we lean on to participate in a timely way? Because honestly, you pull all this together and then somebody has to read it all and organize it, and, you know, where I think Rich might do that. Once you start working on it, you need somebody else's eyes on it. You know what I mean? So do we have, or can you think about it and get to me? I know this is really something everybody wants to do.
Well, just for clarity.
But
wait,
on-
I don't understand. If Holtec, if IWG, if AGO are taking sections.
Well, their sections.
They are identifying this is what they wrote.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. Well,
Absolutely.
I didn't know whether it was just all going to be then pieced, and it would be from the
I don't
panel.
think so. I don't think we want to rewrite it once they do it. I don't think we're trying to write a book. We're trying to put together what the progress of the year was. Our obligation is to inform the citizenry and the legislature and the governor what we did, where we're at, and the questions that we have. And last year, one of our questions was, hey, Governor Charlie Baker, what are we going to do with all this waste? Which is what brought tonight's meeting about, okay? Does that make sense to anybody? That's all I have, really.
And Patrick, maybe you can have, you know, some overhead shots of, you know, what the site looked like on New Year's Eve of last year, and you know what I mean? You can see, delineate to the governor.
Bird's eye view.
Yeah, let me see. I was like, let me see if I have tons of pictures. Let me see if I can get a drone up to
You know,
give-
when the
to
governor
change
reads
the
this,
difference
I want him to be able
I
to
got
see
an
what's going
FAA
on.
pilot for you.
I know you do. I have an FAA pilot for the security manager too, so. But yeah, no, I'll have pictures, and obviously, you know, a lot of it will focus on the fuel stuff, so there's a lot of good pictures there.
Okay, moving on. Looks like we're right on time. It's 8:16, so we have 14 minutes available for the public. Does anyone want to speak? Anyone beyond? All right, Jim, why don't you go first?
Give him some time, give him a time limit, please. Give him a time limit.
Okay, sure.
Last conversation, no.
raised a question to me about the report. Is this?
I'm sorry, Jim, what was that?
This recent, you're talking about parts of the report. I guess I'm a little confused.
Please make
I
sure
see
the
the
microphone is
report.
turned on.
I've got a green light that they'll.
Means your mic is on.
Good. Is this the report of what Holtec has done?
The green light needs to be on.
Okay, we got it.
Push here, I can read, even without glasses. Is this supposed to be a report of what Holtec has done and what the working group has done, or is it supposed to be a report of what the committee has done, or is it what does the committee have done and a report on the status of what perhaps other people have done?
It's called an NDCAP report. You figure it out.
I tried last year and I had a lot of trouble.
Well, maybe you want to write it, Jim.
Will you let me work on it?
So,
Okay, that's my first question. That was just a question, and frankly, I'm perfectly happy to participate.
that would be
No, I
great.
bet you would.
Thank you.
Next question, Seth, I promise not to leave. When we were here before, you had just gotten on the job, and I'll admit we dropped an awful lot of paper on you. But I've been focusing more, as you know, on the settlement agreement and what it requires than a lot of the particulars that you've gone through, frankly, on the plan, which is mainly a report of the specifics that they've done. One of the things the federal settlement agreement requires is that you and DEP and Holtec, presumably CDI, get together and confer to discuss. How often has this happened?
About every 2 weeks.
Are there any memoranda of these discussions?
None that I'm aware of. We usually participate by, video conference.
And you don't keep any memoranda of these?
I do not.
Does anyone that you're aware of? Because one of the reasons I'm asking is that in the past, we've been told that if there were any memoranda of these conferences, they'd be provided to NDCAP and the public. But there aren't?
Well, news to me. I mean,
Okay.
so we get invited to team meeting that's a production meeting once a month. And so, we're at that one. It's a Holtec meeting. We're in a listening mode more than anything else. And then, the only type of things that come up are the things that have to do with our permitting and things of that nature, just like we would with any other type of source that we work with, certainly on the Mass DEP side of things.
And I understood you to say that you've now completed the review of that plan they submitted last May.
So, Mass DEP, Gerard and I, for Mass DEP in the areas that we work in, and Jack Priest have provided comments to the Attorney General's office, and they are focused on the different sections and paragraphs in the settlement.
11, what is it, A to L or something?
10 and 11.
10 and 11, A to
Yep.
L. And I gathered none of those comments have yet been provided to Holtec.
That's correct.
Have you at DEP and DEPH reached any conclusions about the extent to which there has been compliance with the settlement agreement?
No, we've just made comments to the AGO at this time. Yep.
And eventually the AGO will get your comments back and things will go to Holtec, is that right?
Well, the plan right now is for the AGO to review it and, and discuss things with us, and then they will issue some type of a document that will be issued to Holtec, and copies will be shared with the NDCAP.
And also,
for
those
dissemination.
will be publicly available documents.
So those will be public document.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thanks a lot.
Yep, you bet.
Question on the major discussion for tonight, which is obviously what do we do with spent fuel? I think it's fairly clear from the discussion that this is a highly political issue. The fact that there have been 55 bills that haven't made it anywhere should tell everybody a lot about the difficulty in getting anything through Congress, where, let's face it, there is a great deal of lobbying money from the nuclear industry that wants to keep the industry alive and well and spending not as much money or no more money than they have to. I think we need to keep in mind what both the Blue Ribbon Commission and, frankly, the DOE report of, I think it's really only 4 or 5 days ago, said, GAO, my mistake, thank you, said that anything that is done with this waste, any storage, has to be consent-based. That is obviously going to be another major political consideration. But Mr. Mahoney hit something right on the head on that. There are about 100 places in the country at the moment where spent fuel is being stored. Most of them, I think, perhaps all, are like Plymouth, And the one thing Plymouth, and I assume they, and I think it's a pretty good chance that's correct, never consented to was to keep all of this long-term. And all of that is going to enter at least as heavily into the political discussions as the consent of places where it might be sent in the future. And I'd just like to put one example in front of the panel to remember. If you're living in most of the Boston area, you get all your water from the Quabbin Reservoir. That was built in, I believe, the 20s and 30s. How did they do it? They destroyed, I believe, 7 towns, five towns. They're all gone. A lot of those people didn't want to move. They didn't want to have the Quabbin Reservoir there. But it's a very good example that there are circumstances in which the greater public good does require that some people may not be able to retain and keep what they have. How is that managed? My guess, I frankly didn't write any of the checks, is it was done with money. That the people who did not want to move were given the wherewithal to be able to move to continue their lives. And I would suggest that that is going to be a very big part of consent, both in terms of where any of this stuff may go, and also in terms of the consent of probably at least 100 congressional districts to keep it as long as they're being asked to keep it. Consent's a two-way street. It's not simply where it is going, it's where it is, because they're all NIMBYs. We're all NIMBYs. Nobody wants this stuff, but something has to be done with it. The political will has to be found to do something with it. That political will is going to have to overcome a great deal of resistance in Congress, although DOE and the Blue Ribbon Commission were working strongly for it. It's not going to happen right away. It's not going to be purely scientific, oh, gee, look at all the goodies we've figured out where we can go. So I think there's going to be a focus on things. It's what can the states do, all of them who are affected with this, to move their congressional delegations to reach a reasonable, fair solution. It's not simply Plymouth, though it clearly affects us.
Thank you. Diane?
Thank you. I just want to thank this panel for your last annual report. You began it by saying that the nuclear waste is the single most dangerous threat to the people and the environment in the state of Massachusetts, and that is the biggest recognition I think this panel has on their plate right now, because it's there now, and we have to be paying attention to it. But, Mr. Peckering, did you say that you need a permit to plant the shrubbery around the pad?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
we need to modify the wastewater treatment plant permit
Okay.
for the purposes of removing 12 of the 36 leach pits there.
Okay, but there needs to be a permit to do the plantings?
I can't plant where they need to go until I modify the pits, and I can't
Okay.
modify the pits until I have the permit.
Okay, because I'm just thinking, I didn't know, but I think you built the whole nuclear waste dump site without a special permit. Is that correct?
No, we had a building permit for it, didn't need a
Wasn't that-
special permit.
didn't that happen in the past?
Didn't need a special permit.
No, but you need it for this. That's interesting, the shrubbery gets the permit. Anyways.
It's not the shrubbery that gets the
Well,
permit,
but
Diane.
to plant the shrubbery, you have to go through some kind of permitting process,
No,
but I don't want to argue
I'm
with that.
just saying the permitting
Okay.
process is only related to the wastewater treatment facility.
I understand,
not the
I
shrubbery.
understand,
So
but it's all
there's-
about the shrubbery.
There's
But,
a state water pollution
but I
control
think we could-
permit
yeah.
that needs to be modified.
I understand, yeah, to plant the shrubbery. But anyways, and you know what, I think we all do agree that nobody wants the waste, nobody wants it, but we have it, and that's the reality. But, you know, why did Pilgrim close if nuclear power was so important as a solution for climate change?
I mean, it closed.
Who said that?
No, I'm just at-
The
why did-
decision of the company at the time was because of the low price of natural gas. Nuclear
It
couldn't
was all about
compete.
the money, yeah. Yeah, so I think Senator Pacheco, who I knew in the 90s, he was a great anti-nuclear representative. But he did mention about cost and time when it comes to the small modular reactors. And that's what's really going to kill that whole thing, is because we really need energy that's clean, green, and safe. And small modular reactors are not that because they produce more plutonium. So let's get on and putting our money into that kind of good energy as opposed to nuclear power in any source. And one other thing too is Holtec will probably get a license for the centralized interim storage in New Mexico in 2022. The other company just got their license in Texas. That means that waste, it's not going to happen because we know the waste is here for forever. But that means Holtec as a company is trying to push this nuclear waste onto a site where the government doesn't want it. The New Mexican governor is against this, the senators, the Council of Pueblo, governors. Nobody wants this waste, and yet they'll be licensed to do that. How does this panel feel about working with a company that's trying to push waste where there is no consent? That's what's going to be happening. So we have to get back to, nobody's going to answer that question, but we have to get back then to the danger that the waste is right on this. Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
I am so glad somebody wants to decommission that plant. I can't tell you how glad I am. And I am perfectly willing to work with every member of Holtec and CDI that I have met on site because I think they take their job and their role seriously, and I am grateful to them for doing it. What I can't stand is the prospect of that fuel sitting there for so long.
Right.
I think it's wrong. I think it's a societal error. I disagree about the threat. I think the bigger threat is the lack of real dedication to solving the problem. I'm with Pacheco on this. I'm about the solutions. I'm not about hanging on to my animosity toward the old-style nuclear facility that got us into this mess in the first place. That's dead. I'm burying it. I'm happy to be part of this panel as a result, but I don't think our job is done until we address the waste issue, right. And I'm not going to let my foregone conclusions stop somebody from innovating a way out of this. And I think that if we put our brains together, our resources together, our hopes and dreams together, that we will solve the problem. I have no doubt about it. But we can stand in the way too.
Well,
watch us.
Okay, okay. So I'll finish with this, and I've said this 1,000 times. We have the waste there. What is the best solution for today? We can look at the future, we can look at science in the future, but right now, today, we're in a situation that's very dire. These canisters, and now the Swiss solution, they have 18-inch steel cans that are pressurized vessels that can be monitored, can be repaired. They have hot cells, so if a problem happens, they can take care of the waste. And they're in a climate-controlled building with real security. That's, I think, what we need here. We don't have it, and I don't know if we ever will. But the public, I think, really wants us to all be protected because it's not going anywhere for a long time. So yes, I think we all agree, Pine, absolutely. If this waste can be taken care of, I think we'd all say hallelujah. But right now we owe the next generation an apology because we haven't done our job to protect them. But right now, today, I think we really need to look at a solution that can be implemented somehow. But it's all about the money, we know that.
Well, that's why I think going to CSG is a good idea, and I don't think, you know, there's only one thought about what the forums and the thinking should be about.
Right, but I'm just talking about, with all due respect, Pine, I'm talking about today, right now, what's happening out at the site. That's what we're
Today,
talking
right now, the stuff is moving upstream,
I know.
up the hill, and they're doing a great job.
And they're in those thin cans, and it's can be hit by the street, so.
You're not going to change that tomorrow, Diane. That's what we have. Let's make sure it stays safe.
Okay, and it isn't, and so that's why I think the public is saying it's unacceptable. Yeah.
All right, we got time for one more. Henrietta, 3 minutes.
I want to start with Pat, because Pat and Mark and his crew gave us a really first-class time. It was highly interactive. We were a fractious bunch, and it lasted longer than I think any of us expected. And we are grateful because it does help to see what's going on behind the scenes. But I want to narrow down the focus. I certainly agree that exploring all the possible scenarios for waste management, especially through organizations like the CSG, is a good thing, and I would love to see some fora. But right now, it seems to me our charge in this panel, this Citizens Advisory Panel, has to do with Pilgrim and the decommissioning of Pilgrim. And there are some very specific, modest, but very important proposals that are on the boards in the legislature on Beacon Hill. And one of them is Susan Moran's, the one that Susan Moran has co-sponsored, Senator O'Connor's bill S-1507, an act relative to monitoring dry casks of spent nuclear fuel. And I have to say, it's a tremendous disappointment to me that this has not been discussed at all in the panel, because it is so clearly focused on a very specific strategy that would help us have an early warning, a very specific early warning about any kind of radioactive release. It would demand real-time data coming from each canister on the ISFSI pad, and there is no real-time monitoring of those canisters to date. The proposal was heard in June, and I don't know if you're aware that the Plymouth League, in concert with the Cape Cod League and the Falmouth League, all strongly supported this bill, and along with Cape Downwinders and along with Pilgrim Watch. It is something, and the town of Duxbury. And all of us, we are all representing citizens, and we would all advise the Commonwealth and all the agencies involved with the Commonwealth to be in support of this legislation, which would not cost the Commonwealth much of anything. There's already a computerized alert system set up, and it would not cost Holtec anything, because Holtec will get reimbursed for every single penny it spends on the maintenance of nuclear fuel, on spent nuclear fuel. Therefore, I cannot even imagine a cogent argument against this bill. And I am also, I think it's just a shame that at the NDCAP panel, now 3 months have gone by and we have not discussed this bill. It's more than 3 months, because it was proposed back in a long time ago at the start of the session. So I just.
So where's it at in the legislature?
It's still in the Joint Committee of Public Health. Joe Comerford is the chair of the Senate part of that committee, and Decker is the chair of the House. Susan Moran is the co-chair of the Senate part of that joint committee. And it's just a bill that we should all be supporting. I just can't even imagine a good argument against it. Yeah. Not yet, no. But it would be very helpful if the NDCAP, which is supposed to be. Oh, yes, I gave extensive testimony back in June. And so it would be very helpful if the Citizens Advisory Panel actually advised the Commonwealth to do this. I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer.
Or at least some members.
At least the members, yeah, individually. Now, I'm not expecting Holtec to be enthusiastic about it, because it would be a little bit of work, but it's certainly doable. So the other thing I wanted to say was that, risk, there are whole schools of theory on risk and how you measure it, but basically something that's low risk and even if it happens has low impact doesn't concern us. But when we are dealing with 4,100 814 spent nuclear fuel rods, 800 tons of nuclear waste, and it's all stored on a hill visible from Rocky Hill Road and vulnerable to terrorist attack. It may be a low probability. It may be that terrorist attack or leakage is low probability, but it is very high impact. It has the potential for catastrophic impact. If, for example, a terrorist attack managed to breach several canisters and there were released. Also, speaking to science, as Dave did earlier, and the importance of research and development, I couldn't agree more. But I would like to point out that the Department of Energy's own lab, the Sandia Lab, in 2019, identified as priority number one the management of dry casks that are prone to crack, corrode, and leak. And this is not something we're in danger of today or tomorrow, but with every passing year, and given that dry casks have a 25-year warranty, that 25 years is coming up pretty soon. And this is number one priority for the scientific laboratory at the DOE. So it should be something we are talking about. And because of that risk, we need to support doable legislation coming out of Beacon Hill, one of the few things that the state actually has power on. I know I've exceeded my 3 minutes. Thank you very much for letting me.
Yep, you're welcome, no problem. All right, Mary, a couple of quick questions?
Yes. In the minutes, I started to make comments and was told to bring it up at the end of the meeting.
Yes.
So that's what I'm doing. There's an issue now that the board is down.
Please make sure your microphone is turned on.
Oh, it is. There's an issue that the board is down 2 members. Richard Rothstein resigned, and also Seth Mullen. And Sean Mullen, obviously.
And recently, Mary, forgive me for interrupting, we accepted the resignation of Mr. Kevin O'Reilly, so it looks like it's 3.
Okay.
Currently, the Vice Chair and I have discussed formulating a plan, reaching out to the proper appointing authorities and making sure that we follow up to fill those 3 vacancies as quickly as possible.
Okay, the town of Plymouth
Yes.
has opportunities to appoint more or less 2 people at large, and also someone from the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Committee. My question is this, that Richard Quintal is one of the appointees, and he has not attended any meetings. And I wonder whether this panel to properly represent the town of Plymouth, should consider how many meetings you can miss and still be considered a member of the meeting. I think that's a procedural issue. Also, I understand that you are representing the Nuclear Matters Committee.
Myself?
Yes.
I don't think I was filling that role. I can confirm that. I thought that was Mr. Rothstein.
Yeah.
I've contacted him, and he said he was appointed as one of the 2 at large, and that Mr. Quintal took your position as a representative from the Board of Select People.
Correct, yes. And
then you, after Joe had resigned, took that slot. But my question is, how can the Plymouth Nuclear Matters Committee really have representatives when they haven't met and all members' terms have expired and they were not reappointed? So I think this is maybe a question for the legislature of why Plymouth Maybe Plymouth should just have 3 at-large members? It just doesn't make any sense.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah, and take the Nuclear Matters Committee designation off of that, just go with 3 at large.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's a suggestion because it makes no sense. And also, the other point I was concerned about has to do with the template for minutes. For questions, rather. On page 6 in the minutes that we approved, it says that Mrs. Lampert and Mr. Lampert offered work on a template and suggested amalgamation of Jack Priest and Mr. Lampert should be adopted. Mr. Priest stated he would work with Mr. Lampert to come up with a document to send to NDCAP chairs. I would request that Jack Priest actually do that because there has been no attempt to contact, to make any amalgamation, and I think it's important to go beyond what Jack Priest started, and it was great that you started because we needed to get off the dime with all the unanswered questions. But it's important that we know the date, who asked the question, what the question was, who responded, and what they said, and was there any follow-up. And so I would hope that Jack would contact Mr. Lampert, as you said you would, and I know from an email you said you hadn't worked on it for 2 months. And I know you're very busy, and the work you're doing is very important and appreciated. But I think it's important that that be understood.
Well, I'm not I'm not the secretary for the panel. There are 21 other members of the panel. I provided a template. I made some suggestions. I've given it to both the chairs, and I think somebody else could step up. And if they want to work on a amalgamated format to capture something as simple as minutes and questions, then we could do that.
Okay, great. I volunteer.
That's up to the chairs.
Yep.
Well, I just said I volunteered, so that should help the panel.
Great.
And again,
You
thank you
volunteered
for
last
your
time,
important
too.
work, Jack, and getting it going.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jack. All right. Chair and I will take that under advisement. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Good night, everyone.